Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. Today on the podcast, we have Jan Cavelle. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed for having me here.
No problem. Would you like to tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
I could. I am a semi-retired entrepreneur, if there is such a thing, which means that in real terms that I've had a rather too long career in small businesses, micro businesses, SMEs, one of which I scaled or tried to a certain level. Now I am an author, which I still get very excited saying, because my first book comes out in 4 weeks' time with Bloomsbury, and it's called Scale for Success. So I write full time. I write articles on the web and all sorts, but I am an author.
Well, congratulations.
Thank
And
you.
what was the process of writing your book like?
The process of writing a book was mind blowing for me for lots of reasons. It had been a childhood dream of mine, and the real problem was I wasn't sure I had the imagination. Well, I was fairly sure I didn't have the imagination to write fiction. So I cast around for ages for a topic to try writing a book on. And I kept on coming back to the fact that the one thing I knew about really was entrepreneurship. But I thought for a long time, as I didn't totally succeed in scaling up, it would be a bit of a cheat to write about it.
Mm.
So I got a lot of I'm not good enough months to go through. And eventually I thought, well, actually, I battled with it for such a long time. Nobody knows the pitfalls, the problems, and everything else of doing it better than me. So, because I battled to go on and kept on thinking and retraining myself and trying every approach possible. So I thought, well, actually, if I know the problems and one or two of the answers, if I go out and talk to other entrepreneurs, because I have an amazing network anyway and a much better one now, and get their expertise and get that inputted into the book, then we're talking something seriously useful to other people. And I thought, what a lovely way to spend my time, with a bit of give back. Helping people on what I know is such a hard thing to do.
It reminds me a lot of any inspiration from Napoleon Hill there?
I have read Napoleon Hill, certainly, yes, a little bit, I suppose. It's a long time since I've read Think Rich, Get Rich. What's it called?
So
But
the first one was Secrets of Success, I think, and the
yes,
second one was Think and Grow Rich. But
yes.
his project was obviously to speak to all of the successful, I want to say billionaires, but I'm not sure that that's quite right. Successful people back
Mm.
then, and compile all the principles of success and put it into a book. Would you say that you've done that in relation to scaling a business?
I think yes, really. I must admit I'd forgotten Napoleon Hill. To some extent, it's an approach that's been tried before, but I wanted to try something slightly different because what I wanted to do was write a sort of manual, if you like, covering the major topics, which was what I wanted to do originally, and what I was thinking I don't have the authority to do really on my own. And so I decided to put together this jigsaw, if you like, of one entrepreneur expert per topic. And I wanted an entrepreneur who, per topic, who that topic had been a particular impact on their career as an entrepreneur. So you really felt their journey and their experiences reflecting in their advice and were part of their advice. Because I do truly believe, from my own experience and from what everybody tells me, that entrepreneurs learn best from other entrepreneurs.
Hmm. And the other thing that you mentioned, which is Jim Rohn quote, which is "You learn more from losing than you do by winning."
Oh, yeah.
Um, and that applies to you've learned every which way not to do it, and then presumably you picked a particular topic and you spoke to an entrepreneur about that topic, and then it went.
Exactly, yes. So I have, for example, let's start off on your sort of mission and vision, which is so crucial. I wanted to find an entrepreneur who really embodied that into everything they do. And there are a few of them about, but I was privileged in the end to have got the involvement of James Bartle, who you may know of, who is, and some of your listeners may know of. He's actually founder of a company called Outland Denim, and which is Australia based, very big in the States, and does jeans, but and denim wear. But everything they do is to transform the lives of the people who make it, because of course fashion's been very unethical.
Hmm.
And he makes the wear in Cambodia and supports the people out there in the most amazing ways. And it's all very sustainable, and he's done all sorts to change things. And just talking to him, that chapter alone for me was just one of the most inspirational conversations I've ever had. But that's the sort of thing I mean, because who better than to talk to somebody like that whose whole business was built to achieve that? It wasn't that he wanted to originally to make jeans. It was he wanted to change the lives of people who were being abused, really, in situations of abusive worker at poor countries.
Hmm.
So, the whole business was created for that purpose. So that's so exactly the sort of person I wanted for vision and mission, because it really embodies it. And that's a principle I've tried to apply to each chapter.
Well, it sounds like you picked up a few mentors along the way.
Oh
Did
wow, yeah.
did you have any mentors for writing it in the first place?
For the actual writing.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I dabbled with writing a couple of books and got input from writing coaches and my own, really, when I learned to stand back and be able to take enough abuse, even if it was coming from me, about, you have to be kidding, this is absolute junk and nobody's ever going to read it. So yeah, I mean, I've had writing mentors, and I used to write for a digital publication called Real Business, which you may have come across, and I contributed to them for nearly 10 years, and I had a wonderful editor there who taught me a huge amount too. So along the way, I've had a lot of help, but not for this specific book. I sat down and decided to write it, and just went for it. And I got so involved in the project, I just lived and breathed it, and it was sort of taken flight before I, was about 3/4 done before I thought, now what am I going to do with it? Am I going to self-publish? Do I need a publisher? What? Which of course is not what you're supposed to do at all. You really should plan it all out in the first place. But it took hold. It became a living, breathing thing.
How long did it take approximately, start to finish?
The research took a long while because as I say, I didn't just want to wander up to any entrepreneur and say, do you want to talk about this? I wanted it to be so key. So finding that jigsaw, it was okay in the beginning because you could find somebody who, sales was a big part of their business or whatever. But then, I had my topic list, and the longer it went on, the harder it got to find the missing gaps. So that took a fair time. And of course, I mean, I'm a relatively unknown writer. The fact I've written some articles doesn't exactly make me known to anybody. So, if you've got very famous entrepreneurs, and well, some of them are famous, some of them less so, but a good mix. But do they really want to talk to some unknown scribbler who may or may not ever get a book published? A lot of them think they've got better things to do with their time. But people actually were unbelievably kind and so supportive, and the 30 involved were so generous with their time. I mean, again, giving James Bartle as an example, if you've got a multinational brand and you're supporting factories in Cambodia, and he does an awful lot for campaigning for ethical business, do you really want to give up time to talk to somebody like me? But, he did, and he was lovely. And so it went on. It's a long list.
Good.
So, wow.
Well, for the purposes of just definitions, for those that don't know, what does it mean to scale a business?
It's an interesting question, that actually, because it's changed. Scaling a business used to be when you got involved with a bigger scaling, when you got financing involved, big time financing, not sort of friends and family or your own, but actual investors involved. And till about, I'm not sure on the time, but sort of 5 or 6 years ago, 5 to 10 years ago, startup capital through those sort of investors was virtually non-existent. Now, of course, it's much, much more common, and you've got accelerators and all the incubators and what have you spinning off that. So that sort of changed things. And now scaling up doesn't necessarily involve finance at all. It really means sustainable growth, but quite big time growth. We're not talking about sort of going from, 50 quid a week to 60 quid a week. We're talking to somebody who's really wanting to build a sustainable long term bigger business.
Hmm. Are there stages to scaling a business? Because people talk about it fairly universally, you know, but have you noticed that there are different stages?
Yes, definitely. I think the exact figures vary slightly from sector to sector because, for different, I mean, for example, manufacturing needs an awful lot more people involved and therefore money involved and machinery or whatever. Whereas you might start an online business and get a much higher turnover with less outgoings. So there are variants, of course there are, but I think up to you. I mean, your first 100,000 is tremendous to crack. It's so exciting. I remember it to this day. Then you actually sort of get up to your million. From 1 to 10 million, somebody else in the book is Stephen Kelly, who's an entrepreneur who built Sage, for example, and is now head of Tech Nation, or chair of Tech Nation, I beg your pardon, get it right. But he's had an amazing career both in Silicon Valley and in the UK. But he calls that leap from 1 million to 10 million, where I got first start, the Death Valley of businesses, which is really interesting
Mm,
because, he and quite a lot of people I spoke to think it's that stage that is the hardest of the lot because you change completely from being a small, everybody knows it, don't need too many systems, everybody's involved sort of business to not a corporation, but an actual functioning structure. And not everybody can make that transition or like making it, actually. People drift into it and find they don't like being involved in that. So there's an awful lot of pitfalls which we can talk about. But then when you've got up to that stage, if you get up to that stage, and I didn't, to the 10, then you've actually put those in place and you get the principles of running that size. And then it is easier to do the next jump to 50 because the principles are the same.
mm.
And then 50 to upwards. There's a lovely Australian entrepreneur in the book who called Roby Zipser, and he's gone from literally working in a garage to floating on the uh, uh, Asian Pan Asian Stock Exchange, which is that's some journey.
Yeah, once you get to those numbers, it's the next step to go in public, right?
Exactly,
Mm.
and that's what he did from a garage, which is not bad going.
What are three principles you would like to share on scaling a business if you wanted to share three or had to
No, of
share three?
course. I think I thought about this when you asked me, and I think I'm tempted to say prepare, 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 which by the time I got to the third one, I don't seem to be able to say anyway. But I think the three big areas you want to prepare are yourself, actually, which is something people forget because they're so busy and they're building and they're living the growth. But actually, you need to change yourself and develop, and you need to learn and you need to become a very different person in business. So I
Mm.
think prepare yourself is one. prepare your team, because you may start off with a lovely team who you're very close to and you're all having a lot of fun, and they may not want to grow, which can create an enormous problem because it may not be their vision. And so you're faced with what you do. I've got this original team who are all involved and they're my business and I owe them everything. Do I bring other people in instead and fulfill my vision? Do I give up on my vision? Or, do I somehow negotiate them and say, that's great, I understand, but, you sure you don't want to, would it appeal to you? But that, your people need to buy in, otherwise you won't do it.
What would you say a popular reason for not wanting to scale would be?
For people involved,
Yeah.
I think, I certainly had that one. That was one of my issues. And we started very small. Well, we started from nothing. So very small. And the people were originally working in farm buildings and with a lot of freedom and autonomy and not very, they worked incredibly hard, but it was on their terms. They had a lot of freedom and they didn't have to run staff. As the thing grew, we had to move to a factory setting, and they would wander around going, "I miss being in the barn," and "I miss the fields," and so it was, you're talking very extreme difference. And they tried desperately to get involved in, running the team was on the shop floor, but they hadn't wanted to do it. I mean, it was particularly tricky for me because they were craftsmen. And you can understand that if you're a creative and you love what you're doing, you don't want to spend half your time doing something else.
Mm.
So,
So would you
it can be
say
tricky.
going from one stage to another means less freedom and more processing,
Yes.
and
Yeah,
that.
that's the third one. You've got to have the processes, and most entrepreneurs wince when you say systems and processes anyway.
Mm.
We hate it. It's an awful lot of us. We're big picture people with no patience. In a lot of cases, I'm sure you're not, but I certainly am. And so, it's tricky. We're always meaning to spend time putting in the structures and processes. But again, you're going from you being able to do everything if there's a crisis to the fact that you simply can't step in if there's a crisis,
Mm.
in a bigger business because there's too much for you to do and there are too many people with crises to step in, and you've probably already been accustomed to working ridiculously long hours, and finally you've run out of them.
Yeah. There's only so many emergencies you can handle at one time, right?
That's the one.
So, if your last answer didn't cover it, is there such a thing as scaling too quickly?
Yes, oddly enough, I thought about that, and there are two examples in the book, both of which are interesting. One is a woman who's a friend of mine actually, and runs a very successful management consultancy, but also she does government contracts and I'm just thinking of the word I'm looking for, sort of gross networks. That's the word I'm looking uh, for helping people to grow, and a huge amount of work, and they scale terribly fast. She's a very very successful entrepreneur, and she is very honest, like everybody is in the book, which was one of the things I think is so amazing. And she says, when they did that first scale, they were going the sort of 1 to 10 route. It was obvious that they hadn't got those structures in place. They hadn't got the right people. And they actually had to go back, drop right down, turn down work,
Mm.
put them in place and scale up again. So yes. And the other example actually is going back to James Bartle of Adland Denham, because that's a really interesting one. Because of course we think what we want is lots of sales. Now, a few years ago, he had a situation where he was actually in Cambodia, and Meghan Markle got off an airplane, unbeknown to him, wearing a pair of his jeans, and the press went wild. And they were still moderately small, relatively, and everybody went crazy, and his growth went astronomical. And he says himself that, I mean, he was completely unprepared, and he had a rough time fighting through it because it was a huge adjustment, and it changed their business entirely. So, while it sounds like a dream that we all want in businesses, that kind of publicity,
Mm.
it can be a tough road. And he's a very clever guy, so he negotiated it. But he's honest to me. He said he took it all up.
Yes. Would you say that there was a recurring theme around balancing the acquisition of sales, like in that instance, and then also capacity?
Yes,
So,
yes, absolutely. And of course, again, that was one of the things that I found out the hard way, because essentially I was always a salesperson, and I couldn't help myself. I was so sales led and always wanting to push for sales
mm,
because it's great, and we really couldn't. So yeah,
because of the capacity issue, you mean?
yeah.
Okay. And what business were you in
What
when
what
you
what?
were? Which
I
business
was in
were you in?
manufacturing,
Okay.
but there's a vast skills shortage too, as we know, in this country, and
Mm.
in lots of areas, including mine, and we just couldn't get enough skilled people. And as I say, I didn't have the senior staff who wanted to grow, and I kept on thinking, but this is so amazing. We've built this fabulous brand, and we're selling loads and loads.
So you had the skill and the ability to get the sales, but not the capacity to
Yeah,
produce the
yeah,
product.
yeah. And unlike James Bartle, I failed to find the solutions.
So, what, in your view, is the reason why so many businesses fail? What I'm referring to there is the statistics. So, I'm sure you've heard of the statistics of so many businesses failing, both in the first year and then after the first 5 years, I think it is. Um,
Absolutely. I mean, I think with the first year, there are a lot of people who start businesses and either don't know enough or haven't researched their market enough, or actually have a sort of very different idea of what running a business is going to be. It comes, they think it's going to be an easy life, and of course it isn't. It's something that you absolutely have to love to do and have a passion to do, and then it's easy.
mm,
But it's not easy in its own right. Let's face it, as I'm sure you appreciate. So I think but there's lots of very obvious reasons in the first stage, but then there is this death valley when you get to grow. That you may not have, well, particularly if you haven't got the sales, if you haven't nailed your market and refined the sales. I mean, for example, when we start off, any sale of, we can be a cupcake manufacturer, but we'll sell a dining room table if somebody asks for it and find it from somewhere, because it's exciting, it's a sale, and we're making money. And gosh, whereas by the time you've got up to the million mark, you've got really nailed what your product and your offering and things is if you're going to build it.
mm.
So, that can be a problem. People haven't necessarily got their marketing right, and their market right, should I say.
So, clarity as well about what you're
Mm,
doing, like why you exist, that kind of thing.
yeah, very much so. Yeah. And of
Okay.
course we are, it's noticeable. It was noticeable, I think, before the pandemic, and it was certainly noticeable when I did the research. But the pandemic has accelerated purpose-driven stuff, understandably, and more businesses are understanding that. So it's the way business will go.
You got any thoughts on what will happen as a result of the pandemic in terms of after, when we're all done, what it will look like?
Wow. I think obviously, I mean, it's so difficult to say, particularly with these new strains. But I think it's clearly going to accelerate the world of tech and AI. So we're going to see massively different things happening at a very quick rate there. And I think the companies that are thriving, and there are loads of thriving, among them are the creative and tech people who are able to be much more adaptable, they're able to be, they're able obviously to function more easily online, but also creative people are more open to changing ways, I think, of business, and it is going to be different. For example, I don't think we'll ever go back. I mean, what happens to manufacturing, I'm not so sure, apart from lots more automation.
Mm.
But I don't think we'll go back to mostly to full-time office work. I think it'll be hybrid at most, myself.
Interesting. I think that it's sped up the retail demise,
Yes.
um, unfortunately, because it was just clinging on, I thought, before this all happened. So,
Though, interestingly, I mean, there are all sorts of innovative things. I mean, again, as I say, I write articles. I haven't written this one yet, so you're very well in advance. But I've done the interview, and I was talking to another entrepreneur in Australia. I do talk to other people other than Australia, you understand, but it just so happens that's the way some of the conversations gone. But he runs a company called Melody Makers, among others. He's a serial entrepreneur, and they supply essentially music for retail. But he's revolutionized it because in lockdown, of course, all his clients were in trouble, and he thought, "What can I do to help?" And he's developed an app that does shopping by appointment, but on a mass market scale, which is much easier to actually run safely in pandemic times. And I mean, the biggest mall in Australia has picked that up and is recommending it to their tenants because, of course, it helps them fulfil their duty of care.
mm,
So, and as he says, if you've got shoppers by appointment, they spend 4 times as much. So, in essence, you need less clients for the same turnover. So he's got clients worldwide now because it's something that, again, the world's opened up. So I think we'll see a lot of changes in the retail market. And again, those people who are creative and open to change and doing things differently, can flourish still.
mm.
I think it is just the people who want to go back to the way things were and can't be open to amazing new ideas who are going to struggle.
The most willing to adapt, right?
That's the one.
I read on your website that it says that you champion entrepreneurship. Would you mind
Always
talking
have
about that?
done, yeah. Or well, I suppose always have done is an exaggeration, but for a few decades. I got involved a few decades ago with a government campaign initially for, dare I say, the EU, which was collaboration between all the EU countries promoting enterprise in quite early days when entrepreneurs were becoming mainstream, and we were charged with encouraging it in schools, colleges, businesses, wherever we could do. There were, particularly for women, there were 50 of us picked originally to represent the UK. And I became fascinated by the whole concept. And the more I learned, the more I realized just how vital entrepreneurship is to the economy.
Mm.
And so while that campaign, as government campaigns do, morphed, changed hands, and petered out, and one thing and another, I've been involved in several since. But wherever I do get an opportunity, I do it because I think it's crucial. Small. I mean, you look at the situation today. We've got people being made redundant through no fault of their own, good people, and they're going to need to do something. We've got people in jobs who might decide to recession-proof themselves and do side hustles. We've got small companies who may grow and employ people. And unless we have that sort of firework going off in enterprise, we've got a dying economy. So yeah, I feel very strongly about it. I
Mm.
will get off my soapbox.
No, I agree with you. That's why I'm interested. Um, I typically ask guests about what their goals are. And I phrase it as business goals, but it can be, have you got any personal goals or business goals or perhaps goals for the book?
Goes of book. I mean, I would love it to reach as many people. When I wrote it, it was genuinely a mix of wanting to help others and also a bit of a lifetime dream, not about launching a career. Nowadays, it's so fashionable to write a book as your business card and all that. But I'd had a somewhat childish dream of getting a trad publishing contract one day, which I never thought would happen, of course, but it has. And so I'm a bit living a personal dream. My combination of writing and talking to entrepreneurs, who I just find the most fascinating thing on earth, combined is for me pure heaven,
Mm.
and such a privilege at this time of life. When you don't expect nice new things to come in, or I didn't. So to be honest, I'm really enjoying that. The launch, because Bloomsbury actually, unlike a lot of companies, actually produce their own sort of sales in Australia and America, and the book comes out there later in July in both of those. So I mean, in a real dream world, my son lives in Australia, so I would love to go and do the actual book launch in person as opposed to virtually, and see him as well. But that's my next step. But I was never trying to launch another career at all. It was I'm semi retired, as I say, so I don't know, but I'm just loving it. So I'll see what happens.
Just enjoying yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
So those that are particularly interested in getting published, have you got anything to share there?
Oh, in trad publishing, it's very difficult. I mean, I think it's worth going on a course, as there are plenty of free ones or taster courses that you can get for $5 or whatever, that tell you how to do submissions, because submissions to publishers are a complex thing. That alone took me about a month. Which is it's not a question of just shoving a manuscript in the post. So they want to know a lot more about you and your background and how you're going to solve the thing.
Mm.
So do your research on that bit. I think hard about whether you're trad publishing or not. Think hard about your reader. Think who are you. Think of it like a business. Who is your target market? What are they going to get out of it? Is it going to benefit them?
So do a course and then think about it from that person's perspective. Who's going to be your buyer?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, good advice. Do you have anything else to add?
I think I'm probably running dry of brain power.
Well, in that case, where is the best place for people to find you and even buy the book?
Well, they can go all sorts of routes. I would say any good bookshop, but of course we've got a little problem about that at the moment. But they can leap on Amazon, and if they do that, they do enjoy it, please leave a review, because that's all about the algorithms, of course.
Mm.
And or they can go to my website, which is www.jancavelle.co.uk, and that's JANCAVELLE, as I'm sure will be in your notes somewhere floating around.
Mm-hmm.
Or they can go to Bloomsbury Publishing themselves, and look for the book there and buy direct from Bloomsbury. So lots and lots of options.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for being a great guest. You shared lots of valuable information, and
My pleasure.
I'll speak to you soon.
That would be lovely. I shall look forward
All
to
right.
that thoroughly. Thank you very, very much indeed for having me as a guest.
You're welcome.